Buenos dias, Matt Waldman. Good morning and happy off week to you, sir. Or no, it's Super Bowl week. What did I say? We're coming off the off week. I'm like, you go Sunday without football and you lose all sense of time and proportion.
I can certainly see how that happens. That's for sure. But it's always college football watching pretty much around here, 365 days a year. I like
that
that.
being the
Yeah.
case, that being the case, there's probably, and by the way, he's working on the rookie scouting portfolio. You people know that. You should go to Matt Waldman, RSP.com or MattWaldman.com, anywhere, and find that, and we'll talk a little more about it. But I think the first story we're going to talk about here, there are some connections. Kliff Kingsbury heads to Washington after spurting the Raiders as their offensive coordinator to become the offensive coordinator there for Dan Quinn. There's a couple of layers to this story. Let's start out with the one that'll be of greatest interest, immediate interest to fantasy managers. What does this do to Brian Robinson's fantasy value?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts it as much as people think. I mean, if we remember, Kliff Kingsbury had James Conner, and James Conner looked pretty darn good in that offense. Even if that offense wasn't great, he was still a capable fantasy producer. Now, if we're looking at top 5 upside, depends on how often they can get into the red zone, which that means that you're probably looking at him more as a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 as your ceiling for him. So it dips him a little bit, but it's not the death knell for his fantasy career, at least from my standpoint, from what I can see, because Robinson can catch the ball, and he's proven that he can pretty much do it all for you.
Yeah, and we're assuming Antonio Gibson Jr. will be moving on via free agency, and that will leave a little more path to workload. So the obvious, additional issue there is it seems like wherever Kliff Kingsbury goes, quarterbacks follow. When you look at the Kyler Murray situation in Arizona, now we see Caleb Williams, Kingsbury most recently an offensive consultant for USC and Washington within striking distance at the 102 of moving up to the 101. How fanciful is this notion?
I don't think it's that fanciful. It's very possible that they could go that route for sure. The fascinating thing to me isn't if you end up with Caleb Williams in that scenario, I do worry that you're basically looking at the worst end of Caleb Williams to start his career, meaning that he's going to be more Kyler Murray-esque in the sense of running around like a chicken with its head cut off in and around the pocket, and not maybe playing as structured football as he could potentially do. So there's a little bit of, have we seen my dog sack something? Yeah, that's his sack that he's got right there in the back. So as you can see, it's RSP season. I give him paper bags. He likes paper bags to rip
I think
apart.
It's probably a safe choice.
It's a safe choice. It's better than my ankle. I'll just put it that way. So we'll feed the dog. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of those scenarios where certainly you're going to get boom bust out of Caleb Williams if we see Kliff Kingsbury able to finagle their way to acquire him. But also the thing that kind of concerns me more than anything isn't the running back or who they pick, who they get at quarterback, but the wide receivers, sticking them to one side of the field and leaving them there. The joke was, Devontae Adams probably is like, I wonder if Devontae Adams came in and said, you're going to have to trade me if Kliff Kingsbury comes
no motion, no shifts in alignments, none of the kind of things that, generally lead to successful offenses. I think that was the complaint in Arizona. It was very, very much, easy to figure out what was going on, and nobody moved around, and the players didn't like it. The fans didn't like it. Opponents seemed to be just fine with it, though.
Yeah, and I look at Kliff Kingsbury's house out there in the Southwest, and then I think him going to D.C., where we know people get paid money to not do a lot of things that maybe they should do. And whatever side of the bench you're on there, I don't really care. It's pretty much the truth, So I kind of feel like Kliff Kingsbury fits right in with this. Like, he's kind of Peter Principled his way all the way to D.C. I would bet after this he runs for Congress. I would say I'd say that's probably where he's the best fit, where there's no motion, things are predictable, and I won't get any more political than that.
And outcomes are predetermined. Okay. I'm totally ambivalent to this move. I mean, what were the alternatives? Chip Kelly seemed to be the next name on the list, or at the top of the list. And by the way, he was at the top of the Raiders list supposedly until Kingsbury came along, and then they hired Luke Getsy, who comes off a sterling run in Chicago. So that kind of tells you where Chip Kelly's probably at in the hierarchy out there, people. So we'll see if he ends up with a job. Not a lot of openings left. In the Rams, there's some free agent issues. Brycen Hopkins. So a lot of times we remember the last thing we see, right? As fantasy managers, we're going to be drafting Jameson Williams at a premium, just like we drafted Gabe Davis a couple of years ago at a premium after huge, playoff-ending performances. Remember, Jameson Williams, it was 3 touches, people. 3 touches.
Yeah.
But also, Brycen Hopkins, Tyler Higbee got hurt. He's going to be a free agent. Is somebody in the NFL going to pay for that single game?
Probably not. They're not going to pay for that single game, but someone's going to pay for him being a promising young player. I think we need to remember that, this was someone who had good run after the catch ability, very athletic as a receiver, couldn't really block extremely well, and had some issues dropping the football back in his days at college. But kind of promising in the way that I'm trying to remember the New York Jets tight end who played at Purdue, who used to drop the ball.
Dustin Keller?
Yeah, Dustin Keller. He's got a little bit of Dustin Keller in him. Thank you for that. So he could be underrated, but I would say underrated in the scope of you're in a 40 plus roster team where you have expanded practice squad spots, and you can practice squad a lot of rookies, and then you can add this guy if you have extra room, if you're in a premium tight end league. Otherwise, I would say wait and see in training camp. He's more likely just a nice number 2 or number 3 tight end for a team who could work his way up. Atlanta has a lot of those types of guys. Michael Pruitt is a good example. He's a Michael Pruitt type.
Let's spin this out then. Let's say he ends up in Pittsburgh, where Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator and needs some outlier pieces to destroy the lives of fantasy managers. Let's talk about Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that means that Hayward is probably the guy that right now, who's the former fullback tight end from Michigan State, who's gotten on the field a fair bit. They already got Washington, Hayward, and Freiermuth, so we know that 2 of those 3 guys are probably going to be okay, and it's probably going to be the more athletic 2. So I don't know. I feel bad for Pat Freiermuth if this works out the way it did last year with Pitts. But Pitts was playing with an injury on top of that, so we'll mitigate that some. And we have to remember that with Arthur Smith last year, while everybody's whining about, Bijan Robinson and Drake and Pitts and them not getting their usage. If you isolate the passing game, what I saw early on, and it didn't change much, was that Desmond Ridder was so bad at being able to read the field with routes that work dynamically between zones, that I think the offense was set up more to have routes that end statically. They just break back to the quarterback and sit there and wait. Because if they start breaking across the field, it confuses Desmond Ridder, and he doesn't know, the red light, green light. He doesn't know which one is which in terms of when to let the ball go. And I think Smith knew that, and I think the offense was designed to be a little simpler for him, and it still didn't work well as a result of that. And I think that you're going to see more dynamic offense, obviously, for the Falcons. But I also hope that depending on who they get as their quarterback, that Smith will just be relegated to, look, make the game plan, and I want a game plan that works. Don't worry about your quarterback. We'll find a quarterback here. Make the game plan as dynamic as it can be. And I think Arthur Smith can do that. He did that. He had success with makeshift pieces in Tennessee. Right. I think he'll return to that with Pittsburgh now that Mike Tomlin will be the one managing him.
I think I'm going to go ahead and feel this as well. I think, our buddy Matt Harmon seems to be pretty high on it as well. I know the initial angst of Steelers fans is understandable coming off what we saw, but also remind you, that we're, go back to Tennessee. I mean, the Arthur Smith's offense was better than Matt LaFleur's offense. in Tennessee that got him a head coaching job. So it's not like we just made up the fact that Arthur Smith is known for being an innovative offensive mind. And we can go back to no further than Cordero Patterson to see some of that, how Arthur Smith, Cordero Patterson does some things really well. It's a narrow band of a few things. And Arthur Smith cobbled together, twisted up this role that turned him into one of the top fantasy producers of the season a couple years ago. So I'm not sitting here at a total loss saying, oh, fuck this. Arthur Smith is going to ruin everybody in Pittsburgh. He may make things better, because if you'll recall, the last guy there, Matt Canada, wasn't great in the interims. Didn't, aside from a big week one outing for them, didn't do much beyond that. So I kind of feel this move. I think this might be a positive move there.
I'm with you, because listen, you can't dice vegetables with a fork, and Desmond Ridder was a fork of a quarterback.
Right, that's right. Without a quarterback, a lot of things don't work.
Yeah.
In Tennessee, we invoke their name. So we're assuming Derrick Henry's going to be gone, although there's a little happy talk this week. Bill Callahan not opposed to having him back. But I think the expectation from fantasy perspective, I just did a mock draft the other night, my first full mock draft, where I got Derrick Henry in the 7th round. Come on, people. What are we thinking here? He's going somewhere. And even if he returns to Tennessee, one of the things that you have to like about this situation is Bill Callahan, not Brian, Bill, his dad, one of the best offensive line coaches in football, showing up to do something with one of the worst offensive lines in football. Now, Rand Carthon's got to do something in terms of bringing some personnel in. They need to shore some pieces up. But having Bill Callahan's a good piece. So whether it's, Tyjae Spears solo or not, I mean, what does this do? Is Tyjae Spears stock is rising? Does it rise even higher with you, Matt, because Callahan is there? You feel that? Or
It does when Derrick Henry is confirmed gone. If Derrick Henry is confirmed gone and with Callahan there, stock rises. It was going to rise anyway because he can catch out of the backfield, and he played pretty well even with that crappy offensive line performance. But there's 3 factors. Basically, he could wind up being almost to the point of people thinking he's overrated and still be as advertised by August if they acquire some free agents, make a trade, and or draft linemen that are quality who could play right away. If they don't do that, and it's just, but Derrick Henry's gone, his stock still rises as a top 24 back. I mean, this is a very talented player. And with Callahan, you got to remember what he did just recently. If we're going to go just recent, Cleveland had massive amount of line injuries to its line last year and lost Nick Chubb, and they still were pretty good running the football with, an aging Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. So Jerome Ford certainly delivered fantasy production, and I think that Tyjae Spears is more talented than Jerome Ford, and I like Jerome Ford.
I totally agree with all that. We'll see. I have a closer eye based on that initial mock, and I think there'll be a course correction on Derrick Henry when he finds a home. But if you're out in the best ball rooms early and you're getting Derrick Henry in the 7th or 8th round, don't shy away from that, people. That's a little bit of a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Running back 12 last year, who looks like he can still get something done, especially if he's in the right Baltimore Ravens uniform. I'll just wish cast a little bit there. Wish casting.
I'm with you for both of us.
I would take other teams too, but that would be like the ideal. All right. Speaking of ideal, it seems to me, Matt, to be ideal that Bobby Slowik is remaining with the Texans, and Jared Johnson too, the quarterback coach, also stuck around, entertained some interviews, and Ben Johnson obviously staying in Detroit to run those respective offenses and continue working. I felt, I was feeling a little more that Slowik was the guy I was more concerned about leaving, just because we have a quarterback outperforming expectations in his first year. You want that development to continue. All the pieces around him seem great. Are you with me on this one, where these are feel-good stories for us?
Oh, they're absolutely feel-good stories, and they're wise stories, because I'm so tired. I'm so tired of teams just fishing out a successful a coordinator from a successful team. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a successful coach because they were a successful coordinator. I mean, I think that we've gone a little too far with some of that. Some of the best coaches we have aren't the offensive or defensive coordinators, but special teams guys, but guys who basically more than anything knew how to delegate. They know how to lead and delegate. Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, two excellent examples of that. So, I think these guys are young and they need a little bit more experience, and I think they understand that. So while I know people who looked at Ben Johnson, for instance, said, well, why didn't he take the Washington gig? Lots of money, motivated owner, promised that they weren't going to meddle, all this kinds of things. But that's the wooing stage. It's just like promising, the wooing stage promises a lot of things, and then once they get that person locked in, the boss sometimes can be like, well, I didn't anticipate this was going to happen. I didn't anticipate Colin Cowherd was going to say something bad about my team. I didn't anticipate talk radio was going to say something that was going to turn into a slogan and make me so embarrassed that my golf buddies were going to be ragging on me. So now I've got to straighten this out, which turns out to be something silly if you stayed the course and just stayed patient. So, yeah, I like that Ben Johnson priced himself out like a contractor and said, I don't want to do this plumbing job. I'm going to raise my price to the point that they can't bid.
So there's a lot of interesting backstory to this one. There's a nice thread out there by Jason Reed at ESPN, and Jenna Lane added to it and I've heard behind the scenes it wasn't the money that the Commanders wanted him. They would have paid him, because nobody knows what a coach makes. But this was more, and Jenna Lane basically said that this was a case where Ben Johnson just didn't feel great about the basketball people running the football show there.
Good for him.
And also, the fact that he, I mean, whatever Washington is putting out there that he wasn't really our guy. Jason Reed pretty much put that to rest, and okay, they were in the middle of a private jet flight to Detroit for their second interview. If his first interview was horrible and they were already off him, they weren't going to be on that plane. Also, offered kudos to Ben Johnson for texting them while they were in flight, telling them to turn around. Or not in those words, but obviously they were not probably happy to hear that. But he also pointed out how Dan Quinn showed up, at Reagan Airport on his own, not flying private for his interviews, and just a totally different vibe. That Johnson was clearly their guy, and they lost out. Well, that's what happens, and you move on.
Yeah.
And I, for me, selfishly as a fantasy manager, I'm excited to see both of those teams keep everything intact, right? This is one of the things about free agency that really gets me is, you see a player who succeeds and has all this, posts all this production, and then they want to leverage that, and I totally understand that they wanting to leverage that and make all the money they can while they can make it. It's a short career. But also, being mindful of what made you that great is not just you, and it's them, right? I mean, their talents, their unique abilities, all those things are fantastic, and it's not like everyone who goes to another place doesn't succeed. Tyreek Hill would like me to know that you can go to a second place, but for every Tyreek Hill, there's an Alvin Harper, or, where it's the supporting cast and the scheme and everything doesn't necessarily mesh with what you were doing in the previous stop. So for fantasy managers, that's always something to watch when things move on, that the changes aren't always for the best. I mean, they create new opportunities, and those are all great, but in this case, Slowik for sure. We talked about it a little bit before, Matt. I felt like Ben Johnson, maybe the Dan Campbell's culture that he'd instilled, and maybe they were working on someone, or at least now he has additional time. But he had to know he was like a prime candidate, right? I mean, the Texans had no idea that Bobby Slowik was going to come in there and light the world on fire and be a prominent head coaching candidate. So I'm guessing their succession plan probably wasn't as far along as maybe Detroit's was. So anyway, feel good about both these guys staying there. No fucking that. This is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you just want you want these teams to remain competitive, and they've started something. See if they, especially in the Detroit's case, give them the chance to maybe finish it. So, but really both. I mean, the fact that they got in the playoffs in year one, the Texans got in the playoffs in year one with Stroud and with Slowik as a part of that. That's awesome. But it gives you. To me, if I'm an owner or a GM making a decision like this, do I want a young person who has been to one playoff game in a major role, or two playoff games, one season worth of playoffs? Or do I want a guy who's maybe had multiple opportunities to be in the playoffs and maybe lost some tough ones, won some big ones? I would rather go that route, from a coaching perspective. I think there's a lot of layers to this than just that. But
I think when you're looking at some of these things, I think teams are coaching the next Shane Steichen, and I think something you said there brings up Steichen. He's a young coach on the rise, right? Clearly a lot left to figure out in his career, but also he'd done a good job in two separate circumstances with two distinctly different quarterbacks in Justin Herbert in Los Angeles, his rookie season, and then Jalen Hurts, and had a big hand in the development of two players, with different skill sets, and had success ultimately with both of them. So I think that there's something to build on there. It's a narrower band for Slowik, obviously. Ben Johnson came in, and that offense, he turned around quickly when he took over. So, and now we have 2 years of evidence with him. So feel a little better about that. But anyway, We'll see. The next cycle will be interesting because Bill Belichick's going to be looking for that job next time. You didn't care this time.
Here's the thing that makes me laugh. They're always copying a trend. They always want the next. You know what that tells me? They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
That's correct.
I mean, if you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't be following a trend.
That should be like the determining factor. Like, this is why we see so many retreads, I feel like, or we have seen up to this point, is because the owners just don't want to look stupid. Yeah. Right? Because they know that this is a crapshoot. They're taking their chances. Well, I think there comes a point where somebody has a little luck with a chance. It's like all the lemmings at this cliff. Once the first one jumps in, the rest of them will jump right in. The NFL's kind of like that.
I laugh, though, unless they're all laughing at the guy they hired, like Dan Campbell. And, that was the media. I'm sorry. They were the ones who were laughing at Dan Campbell. And look who's laughing now. So,
there are qualities that I think, you can see carry over in various coaches, but this is a unique dynamic in that you're dealing with a group of 53 men, very different people, personalities, and your ability to manage those and do the football aspects of that come into play. I mean, you look like at a guy like Andy Reid. How connected is he to the youth of America today? Probably not very.
I don't know, but he likes those nuggies. So
he does like those nuggies. And I think that's another thing we're probably looking at is that, to me, I want an offensive minded coach who calls his plays.
Yeah.
That seems to be a good path. Until it's not. But that's, Arthur Smith, to evidence to the contrary there. I want someone who does that good, like Andy Reid, right? I just think, or Kyle Shanahan. I think when you see the, successful models, to me, that includes that. But, it requires other pieces as well, like quarterbacks capable of executing your scheme at the level you want them to execute it at.
Great offensive lines, maybe a star, versatile running back. Oh, were we talking about the 49ers?
Let's talk about both those teams then. The Chiefs and the 49ers will be preparing in Super Bowl 58. I have this on good authority. That will happen on Sunday. You will be able to hear me on a special 3-hour pregame show.
It's like you're clairvoyant, Bob.
It is. I knew it was coming here. So let's make our Super Bowl picks. This will be my first time. Well, I made this pick before the playoffs even started, but let's go ahead and get our Super Bowl predictions in. Please begin, Matt Waldman.
I'm gonna keep it simple. I think that the 49ers probably have the better team all around. They have the better. I think they have the better offensive line. They have better collection of skill, talent. But I think at the end of the day, there are key players on the Chiefs who match up well against anybody, any given week. And it's hard for me to not believe in Patrick Mahomes to be able to elevate his game and elevate that team for one game, or Chris Jones to elevate that defense, or L'Jarius
for one
Sneed
play when it matters the most.
Those guys to me really understand. I think they still have enough of those guys in him and Kelsey to do that. So I think I'm going to go 26-24 Chiefs.
So I predicted San Francisco before the start of the playoffs. I did not predict they would be playing the Chiefs, and now that they are, I have many of the same feelings that you do about the Chiefs, because once they get here, Like there is something to be said for experience in this under these circumstances, right?
Yeah.
There's also apparently something to be said for having Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. I'm going to stick with my pre-playoff pick, and hope it comes through. I'm going to go with a little more offense for the 49ers in this case. I'm going to go 31-21 and expect just they're going to be leaning an awful lot on Christian McCaffrey. I can think of many worse things to lean on if you're leaning on him, but I do think they have the kind of playmakers. Look, there's going to be, I'm sitting here trying to come up with, who I don't want to play in this game. It's Super Bowl, people. Play anybody you want. There are no players that are ruled out. The Kadarius Toney anytime TD is looking really good to me right now, just because it's the Super Bowl, and that's the kind of crap that happens at a Super Bowl. Him or Kyle Juszczyk being the MVP would not surprise me. So, well, yes, it would. I'm lying. That was total bullshit. But those guys having, being important players, or Noah Gray or whoever. I mean,
pick the most unlikely cornerback to return a tipped interception from Kadarius Toney, and I'll take that bet.
All right, so there you have it. 26-24, Kansas City Chiefs for Waldman, 31-21 for Harris. We'll revisit those next time around and see how we did. I'm
probably
them
poorly.
Down.
There we go.
I hate that part. I hate predicting things. Predicting the future is tricky business unless your name is Nostradamus, and then it's not tricky at all because you write things so vague that nobody can tell what the hell you meant. Anyway.
That's right, and it was so long ago it just turned him into a legend, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into a little bit of rookie chatter here. Drake Maye seems to be dropping. Feel it or fuck it.
Oh, totally feeling it. I really didn't understand. I was kind of, when you're doing this, like you said, predicting is difficult business. And you're always, when you're kind of doing this on your own and not really paying attention to what other people scout, you look at it, but then you see on the periphery, like everybody's talking about Drake Maye, and you hear, oh, he's number 2, and you don't know why, you don't listen to it, and you go, oh, he's the automatic number 2, and I'm going, he's like my Desmond Ridder this year. Like, I don't see him as draftable. Like, I know that he's going to be draftable. He'll probably be drafted in the late first round, maybe the second or third round, but I think he has a lot of issues to work on, and I'm going to rewatch a little bit more of his tape. I already did, just to make sure that I feel good about my stance with him. But I think the decision making and the accuracy and some of the mechanics are lacking with his game. He makes some huge big plays, great athlete, but there's kind of some Mitchell Trubisky to his game. In ways that I know, like fantasy people, they hear Mitchell Trubisky and suddenly it's like, rotten fish or something, basically just came across. So yeah, he's someone I'm staying away from, and I'm not surprised that some evaluators are leaking that idea at this point. And this is the time before the combine that usually you can probably believe a little bit of this, though. Think it is a fluid situation. Maybe people are getting the drop on being able to say don't believe anything you hear in draft season, and draft season's already started.
Bo Nix. With all that said, Bo Nix rising. You feel that or fuck that?
I'm totally feeling that. I like Bo Nix. He's somewhere in the range of he can definitely become a good. I think he can become a competent starter in the league, maybe even a good one. People are going to talk a lot about the Oregon offense and say, it's a scheme, and he looked better in that scheme. In the SEC, he wasn't as good. But I would say that if you watch his tape, he's accurate. He moves around well in the pocket. He makes some strong decisions. And the entire Oregon offense isn't just RPOs. They run a lot of RPOs, but they do oftentimes make him run some plays where he has to make full field reads, where he has to manipulate defenders, where he's actually creating in and outside structure. And I think he does that pretty well. He's a guy that I think would benefit most from having a year to sit. But I think that if you gave him like the Sam Howell treatment in terms of the time that he had off before he got to really play, I think you'll see Bo Nix rise to the occasion better than Sam Howell.
feel like we're bearing the Spencer Rattler lead here, or the J.J. McCarthy, the best quarterback in the class lead. Thank you for that tidbit, Jim Harbaugh. Appreciate you calling that out. Maybe next time ask your quarterback to do something, and we'll all know how good he is. We'll save some of that for the future.
He
Matt.
he thought chickens were nervous animals, right? And then changed his mind, right?
I think
Something like
that's
that.
true.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
true.
Yeah, we'll keep.
Why do
talking.
NFL teams miss on quarterbacks?
I think because it's the most complicated position to study in sports, and it requires it's a performance position, and I don't mean sales performance. All you corporate people out there, or whatever it is that you do.
First place is an El Dorado. Second place is the steak knife. Third place is you're fired.
There you go, David Mamet. There we go. So, but yeah, it's not the corporate performance. It's on stage performance. You're on a stage. You have to interact with your teammates. It's like a band or like other actors. There's an improvisational element to it that is difficult. And so it combines a lot of technique and concepts and theories, as well as athletic ability and improvisational performance and intuitive ability. And there's no real great formula for that. You can recognize it when you see it, but it's kind of like the apples, it's like kind of like Apple when Steve Jobs would like have a product and he'd have 8 million iterations of it, and the engineers would be coming up with stuff, and they'd go, well, I don't know what you want. We've already gone through this 5 times, and 3 times you like this, and now you don't. And Jobs was basically like, I'll know it when I see it, and that's not the most reliable thing to have to deal with when it comes to evaluation. But teams have overemphasized the intellectual element of quarterbacking, and they're just beginning to understand the processing part of it. And the processing part is rooted in confidence and intuition. You have to have that confidence of the moment you see it to let it go. Alex Smith was more like the academic who saw it and said, well, we need to do some more studies for the next 2 to 3 steps before I decide I'm going to let it go, and now it's too late. It's already passed you by. So those are the big reasons why they miss on it, is that they're still understanding that that the mind is the most important part of the equation, and it's the mind's connection to the body and the confidence aspect. It's an emotional intelligence that quarterbacks have to have, and we're still at the early stages of studying the emotional intelligence of talent. It's a fun buzzword in corporate America, but it doesn't really, people love EI, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to leverage it and know how to recognize it or actually value it when they get it, especially the people in power who don't have it and are hiring people with it, and then have much consternation as a result of now being asked to trust those people, and they don't. And it's the same thing carrying over in the NFL.
Be interesting to see if Drake Maye's assessment, if he starts to slide out of that top 3 range. We'll be looking for that in the coming weeks. I'm going to be looking at how early Brock Bowers goes. Seems like the next big producing rookie tight end. We've had some great successes just this past year. Also, somewhere someone's going, but Kyle Pitts. Feeling or fucking Brock Bowers is the next big producing rookie tight end.
If I had to err on one side of it, because I'm on the fence right now, I'm going to err towards feeling it. Mainly because he is very talented. I think he's going to find a system where they're going to exploit what he does well. I think that he's one of those players that he's a move tight end. He's more like Laporta. He's going to need a fit. Yes, you see him run over people in the open field, and he's strong. But he's someone, and he can make some fantastic catches. He does have some technique issues that are kind of understated. They're isolated to really one type of target, where it's like high and away from him, where he gets both hands on the ball and he claps it and drops them. So, but I don't think that's going to destroy his opportunities. But I just don't think he's a technically sound blocker who can be used in a scheme to be in maybe a two tight end set. So if he winds up with Harbaugh in Los Angeles, where maybe Harbaugh instills more two tight end sets, Bowers could probably be a factor in that regard. But I would say I don't think you're going to get the next. I don't think he's going to top Laporta. I don't think he's going to top Pitts year one, as much as those guys are. But I think he'll still have fantasy value. Maybe he'll be more in the realm of Dalton Kincaid, who was underused on certain types of routes and could have been better, but still placed as one of the top 12 producers in as a rookie in fantasy for a tight end all time. But people weren't like talking about him that way. I'd say Bowers is more likely to have that upside right away.
Surprised one here. Zach Robinson in as the coordinator in Atlanta for Raheem Morris. Kyle Pitts rebound, feel it or fuck it. One word, go it.
Feel it, totally feel
look
it.
At him go.
Yeah, totally feel it. Pitts is
I didn't
too
even
good.
have to put your feet to the fire as hard as I thought. You're all in.
Yeah, I'm all in on Pitts. I'm good with that.
All right, the talent wins out at some point. He's still a very young man, and maybe we have the right offense for him. Matt, who was your first favorite football player?
Ozzie Newsome, speaking of tight ends who were unbelievable and played that wide receiver role. Go watch him in the early 80s and you'll see some of the most insane catches. You'll see some insane catches from a wide receiver. And he was a wide receiver at Alabama before they moved him at tight end. So he was really kind of the pioneer of that move tight end position, he and Kellen Winslow in the same era. How about you?
I like so many. I would probably, if I like one that caught my attention early on was Mike Curtis for the obvious reason.
I totally get you being a Mike Curtis guy. My God, that's so perfect. Oh my God,
very tough guy, middle linebacker for the Colts. Gained quite a bit of notoriety for decleating a fan who didn't have any cleats on, but thought he would come on the field anyway. They handled things differently back then.
They did.
Look it up. It's probably on your YouTube device, but I love that. I I was like a like a lot of guys in the trenches. I was a big Jim Otto guy. I thought he was great. And Mick Tinglehoff. I mean, going way back. So. I played center as a kid, started out when I was a wee little leaguer and stuff. And so, had watched some of those guys probably influenced, where I wanted to play. So there's a lot of guys. All right. So there we have it. I've just dated myself completely, as did you. Well done.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. And if I weren't such a Browns fan, I would have said Joe Green. But
there you go. I love Joe. Loved all the Steelers linemen on both sides of the football, all their linebackers.
Yeah, Joe Green and Mel Blount for me. Yeah, Mel Blount was the shit.
I mean, what a monster. I like going further. I mean, probably my favorite player of all time, Randy White.
The manimal.
Eventually, just like eventually, just like unrestrained monster, the manster, as they call him. It was a great he was a great player, and I actually ended up on a flight with him. I think going to a Super Bowl, which Super Bowl was it in Jacksonville many years ago, was on the plane with him, and he was very congenial with everyone and seemed to be very popular with the folks. So, all right, awesome. Well, I like a lot of football players. I liked Howie Long when he played. There are so many of them.
I know, we could go on and on, but who was your first pick in a fantasy draft? Your first ever pick?
I want to say Dan Marino. Probably, because the first year we played, you didn't know really, there wasn't a lot of strategy. You just picked the guys who scored the most touchdowns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think, and I think the early, Jerry Rice would have been on that list in the first rounders, and Joe Montana and all that, that whole crew. But I want to say that it was for me Dan Marino.
Yeah, Rice was my first pick. That was my first ever pick. Was him at the end of the first round. I think I went Jerry Rice, Ricky Waters, and Terrell Davis as my 1, 2, 3 in my first draft. That worked out well. So
I feel like we didn't look for handcuffs back then, but there were some natural handcuffers for the back in the day for Dan Marino, and I think the Marks brothers were big pieces there back in the day.
Dan Marino would just wipe the floor with every quarterback in this league right now.
I think that first year, I'm just looking it up, he threw 44 touchdowns the first year I drafted him, the first year I played. So it was a good season for me.
What an amazing quarterback. I mean, if you're young and you listen to this and you have not seen Dan Marino, go watch Dan Marino. His release is unbelievable. It is
pretty nuts. Oh, what's the ballsiest first round pick in a fantasy draft?
Edgerrin James, rookie year, first round. That was probably my ballsiest pick, I would have to say. How about you?
I can't even think of one. I mean, over the years, like, this almost would go as the stupidest, right? Like, what year did I make the biggest mistake ever? And honestly, I tend to go pretty safe with first round picks. That doesn't mean they work out well. I mean, 2 years ago, Jonathan Taylor would tell you that.
Yeah.
But I was racking my brain on this, and I don't know that I've ever made like a super ballsy out of the norm pick. That's not Bob Harris's lane.
Well, there we go. So
I don't know if Edgerrin James was never. It turns out not that bad.
It turned out a great pick, but I remember the reaction I got when I picked him, because I could have had Eddie George or Marshall Faulk, and I picked Edgerrin James. I did end up taking Eddie George after that. Now, if I had taken Marshall Faulk, I already cleaned up in that league, but if I had taken Marshall Faulk, it would have been crazier because that was his first year with the Rams.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, people were like, you're not taking Eddie George, or you're not taking Faulk. There were a number of other running backs. So
I mean, I've had so many disastrous first round running backs, Kijana Carter, Curtis Enos. Could have realized drafting linebackers for your running back was not a great move.
Yeah.
Bears should have realized that as well, apparently. There were so many.
There was a year in this league I was in that was a home league. We had a good time with folks, but we had a GM who was just not quite on the up and up. He left fairly early from the league after a couple of years, but I remember he was like, I can't believe it was like the 6th or 8th round one year, and he goes, I can't believe this, but why is Barry Sanders still on the board? When Barry had suddenly retired. He's like, I think I'm going to take Barry Sanders, Now, if that was like an 18th round pick and he has an idea of him coming out, that might have been something. But,
Well, while we're talking about the running backs, what do most people get wrong about running backs?
I think they overemphasize speed. I think there's a minimum level of requirement for speed that is valuable. And anything beyond that, I don't want to say there's diminishing returns, but if they don't have the rest of the baseline skills, like good decision making, managing the game, good balance and footwork, who cares about speed? And I think that a lot of times we get a little bit too enamored with seeing players who make like 2 to 3 big plays per game in college, and then because they can run at 20, 21, 22 miles per hour, they get vaulted up draft boards, and they don't have the requisite skills to perform. I mean, take a look at Devin Singletary and what he did this year. I know it's an extreme, but it's a good example. You can look at him, LeGarrette Blount, Emmitt Smith. None of these guys were fast. Walter Payton wasn't extraordinarily fast. You want a minimum level of speed. You get the baseline, and then the rest of that, you'd rather look at the other factors that I'm talking about.
All right, let's wrap it up with this. And I totally agree with that. I think, I always like to watch the landing spots. I think that's a big factor as well. What's the city you'd like to watch an NFL game at their stadium? What stadium would you like to watch a game in that you have not?
Yeah, I would say I'd like to go to Chicago. I think I'd like to see a state, even though the Bears haven't been great lately. I think going to Soldier Field would be kind of cool. And just because the city of Chicago is such a cool city, I think it would be fun to watch a game there, to experience kind of like the food and the atmosphere. And it's one of the oldest, it's one of the oldest franchises around. So just being around, just kind of getting a vibe for that storied franchise would probably do it for me.
Yeah, I'm probably somewhere in Lambeau Field would be the place where much history has transpired, and just like the whole aura that goes with it. But I am told by people who have been to many of these places, the stadium in Santa Clara, the 49er stadium, is amazing, and the stadium in Seattle looks phenomenal. I would love to see that. I have watched a game here in Dallas. It was a Super Bowl many years ago, but it's an amazing venue just in general. So like that's like most of the venues anymore. The newer ones are just amazing places.
Like malls, yeah.
Right, they're like malls, and they're really user friendly, and the Wi-Fi is great, and all all of the food is fantastic, all the things you'd like. So yeah. The truth is, we don't get a lot of opportunities to go to football games. If you work in this business, you're kind of tied to your home base, and it's hard to get out and take days off to actually go watch an entire football game all by itself.
Yeah, it's true. I would say probably when retirement comes, I'll probably take in more football games. I might even travel just to go experience it. And to be honest, I'm almost kind of more in the mode of not wanting to go see NFL or college games. I wouldn't mind just seeing some high school games. There's something about
like the ease of attendance, right? I mean,
the
just
ease of attendance, just something about just
walk
going
the parking,
seeing it simple
all day.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
It's an old man thing.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but I
missed a Tool concert, by the way. Last Friday night, Tool was playing the band Tool, in case anyone's wondering what the hell kind of Tools I would go see play something. It's a band called Tool that I've seen pretty much every single show, at least I want to say since 2006. Every opportunity that I've had, they were here in Dallas. I saw them here in 20 and in 22, and they're back here again. I had a show that night. The singer's birthday tour is going to come. I was at his 50th birthday when he did those shows at the Greek in LA. He's doing one at Red Rocks this time, and they're really fantastic. So I'm thinking, I'll go see that instead. And I sat here doing a radio show solo. And it turns out if I had taken the night off, Dempsey was under the weather and wasn't able to do the show. So I would have left Sirius in a big lurch. But as I sat here going, trying to talk myself into all the great reasons why I didn't go. Many of the things that I think about football games. Oh, you got to go find a parking place. You got to stand in the line. You got to drive downtown. You got to do it. And by the end of the night, I'm going, fuck, I wish I would have gone.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to grin and bear it and realize and just enjoy sometimes the little inconveniences are all they really are.
It's part of the fun.
Small inconveniences. It's part of the fun. It's
part
of the journey. I would say if I could do a road trip, and take in all the different stadiums over the course of like a couple of months, maybe each year, like maybe do like during the season, like do 8 stadiums a year, that would be kind of fun at a certain point. But
well, that will have to be like 30 years from now. I'm retiring at 92, so
okay. Well, we'll do that, and we'll hit and we'll walk down the Grand Canyon. We'll see how that works in our 90s, right? Okay.
All right. What are we going to do in the interim? We're going to work on the RSP, the rookie scouting portfolio. Do tell.
Yeah, I got to get back to that. Like Tool, Bob's been getting that since around 2006, maybe a little later than that. I don't know, but it is available for $21.95 at MountWaldman.com. You know the deal. We've raised over $60,000 since 2012 for Darkness to Light, which is a fantastic organization to prevent sexual abuse of children, as well as to be able to help adults understand how to deal with it when it is reported so that they don't compound the issue. Go see Paterno or, the movie Paterno with Al Pacino, and you'll kind of get an idea of kind of the ignorant attitudes from very smart people with some of these things and how it can be just an awful situation. So Darkness to Light has worked with groups like Penn State and in addition to a variety of individuals and organizations to help out. They're a very highly rated charity. Highly recommended. If you want to donate to them, d2l.org, you can do that directly. You can also buy the rookie scouting portfolio, and up to $5,000 is sent to them each year that I've been doing this since 2012. And you're going to get a great draft guide for the offensive skill positions, and it's 900 to 1,000 pages, and you can go to MountWaldmanRSP.com to learn more about it, or just go to MountWaldman.com and get it. Thanks.
I read all of those pages at least twice every year. They're fantastic, each and every one of them. Sometimes I read some of them maybe 4 or 5 times. Even better still.
Look at you. Well, I mean, I'm glad one person, we got one person happy with it, so we're good from that angle.
Every single year. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Good luck. Love you, Matt. Goodbye.
Love you.